Number one, what we're going to do this morning is a slideshow that we have presented before. I expanded it for this group. There are things in here we would not use in a regular program, and there are also points in here that we would not use on the tour. But we thought it would be a good presentation for you to get a feel of, again, of how the place looks, what we say about Tomo Kahni when we're making these presentations. Usually we only have about 80 slides, which lasts about an hour. We've got about 130 slides here this morning, so we'll probably run about 2 hours, but we'll take a break in between. Also, Craig, when he gets here, hopefully, will have brought a script that Gene and I use when we're actually doing a tour at Tomo Kahni. And like Cindy said, it's not in concrete. You folks can say it wherever you want on the tour. This is not the script, so to speak. This whole idea of first a slide presentation, then a tour at Tomo Kahni came about one evening out of Red Rock when Bill and Craig and Gina and myself were talking about training. That's where the idea kind of came from. So why don't we get into the slides? I don't know about the lights. Let's see what happens with the lights off. Too dark, or is that? I want to make sure I can see all of you to make sure everybody's awake. All right. We'll go into this just like we were giving the slide talk, say at Red Rock or some other location. But as we go through, I'm going to step out and give some sidebars, some things that we wouldn't normally say in the presentation. And sidebar, that's a term I learned last year. Okay, Tomo Kahni, the state of California's newest park, located about 15 miles east of Tehachapi in the Sand Canyon area. It was through the effort of many dedicated people here in Tehachapi that eventually the state was able to procure it. The then state legislator, Phil Wyman, was able to come up with some money. We were able to buy several hundred acres for a park. The purpose of the park is to preserve the Native American Kauai site and to interpret that site.
I might suggest that if there are things that he's saying that you might say, he does have a script, it might be a good idea to take notes.
And we will be handing out a script eventually when it gets here. All right. This is the remaining Kauai Sioux elder, Andy Green, who also is present today. Hello, Andy. He spent a lot of time and a lot of effort in this whole procurement procedure. We will be referring to Andy from time to time in the presentation. Okay. I'm going to have to give Gene cues as we go along because we had a computer glitch and we were then not able to go through the outline with it. Ulu. This is what the Kauai Sioux call themselves, the Ulu. All of the Indian groups, the Native American groups across the country have terms for themselves, and invariably you'll find that it means the people, and that's what Ulu means, the people. The Navajo, as you know, the Gaya or the Dina means the people. The Paiutes up in the Owens Valley, the Wundu, they call themselves, which means the people. Illinois actually is the name of the Illinois tribe in Illinois, and it means the people. However, we'll use the term Kawayasu. That's what appears in the literature, and it is a name that probably their neighbors call them. Who lives over there? It's the Kawayasu. We use the name Kawayasu simply because it appears in almost all the literature. This particular slide was taken up in Mountain Park, just south of Tehachapi, where Tyler is from here. If you ever have a chance and you're in Tehachapi to take this trail, it's a gorgeous little nature trail in Mountain Park with it is a guided tour, a little pamphlet, and a guided tour with plant and animal and Native American information. Okay. Sometimes I show this slide. This is a sidebar. Sometimes I show this slide, sometimes I don't. You can take your time and read it. Quite often on the tours out there, you do get asked the meaning of Tehachapi, and you can use whatever you wish. Normally, I call it the place of hard climbs. John Hammond and myself kind of agree that that's what it means. Anyway, sometimes I show this slide, sometimes I don't. Okay. The state of California, and the various tribelets, and we'll use that term tribelets, probably only two, what we would call full tribes in California, the Yakutsk and the Mojave, way down in the southeastern side and near Arizona, extending on into Arizona. The rest of the tribelets are tribelets that are gathered together with a common language, ceremonial practices, family groups, and possibly trading partners. And they are little political units. And you can, let me get my pointer up here. And here are the Kawayasu. And this area is really the southern end of the Sierra Nevada range, the Paiutes, the Scoties, and the Tehachapi Mountains. Now, the evidence that the forebears of the Kawayasu were in the southern Sierras, in the mountains, perhaps 3,000 years ago. The Kawayasu reappeared in the Tehachapi area perhaps 1,000 to 1,500 years ago. Later on we'll talk about whether this probably had a lot to do with it, the weather conditions 3,000 years ago as compared to 1,000 years ago. Okay. This is the Kawayasu core area. Kawayasu are a rather obscure tribe, but I think very, very interesting because of where they live. This is the Paiutes in through here, the Scoties, and the Tehachapis. And you'll notice that when you're at the park, as far as you can see in every direction, is Kawayasu core area. Clear north to Walker Pass, the northwest to the South Fork of the Kern, almost to the valley, to the Great Central Valley, south into the Tehachapis and up against the Antelope Valley and up against the Mojave. In addition to the core area, there were seasonal trips into the desert, perhaps out here to see to trade with the Chemehuevi, maybe in this direction on pronghorn hunts with the Tenemans. They had a lot of neighbors. Generally speaking, they were very friendly. Tomo Kahni itself is right about in here, just back of Monolith. Okay? And the area covers a very diverse collection of habitats, clear into the desert areas, covered with wildflowers, okay, up into the Joshua tree woodlands, okay, up into the pinyon pine woodlands and someplace forests, okay, and clear into the yellow pine belts of Jeffrey and Ponderosa. Very, very diverse from a plant standpoint, from animals, also weather. All right. This is looking generally north from the center of Tomo Kahni. You can see the road here that is used for a trail into the central part of Tomo Kahni. Okay. Looking west, that's the monolith, the cement plant you see there in the background, but this is looking west. See Cummings Mountain. Out here is just the tip of Bear Mountain. This is the encampment area, which we will talk about and show a little later. The encampment area. You can't quite see Meadow Springs in here. Okay. And this is looking more south at Tehachapi Mountain or Double Mountain. Still Cummings Mountain in the distance. Okay, then looking east. Looking east, poor picture. Most of the pictures I have taken out there, I've taken early in the morning. They should be taken both early in the morning and also late in the afternoon. Anytime you try to take a picture south or east, anyway, this is looking east totally behind the gives you an idea of just where Tomo Kahni is located. Okay. This is a replica in the Tehachapi Heritage League Museum. It was done by Boy Scouts. It is a replica of a Kahni, and in this case a Tomo Kahni, a winter home. This is a replica, and it's probably, normally the Tomo Kahni would be 12, 15, maybe even larger feet in diameter. It is built of juniper ribs, so to speak, juniper limbs, and then tied together with willow, a thatched covering. The thatching could be done from sage, rabbit, brush, any number of materials, thatched so that it really was waterproof. Now, if you remember in that opening slide, it showed smoke coming from the top of the Tomo Kahni. Very doubtful. It would have been against the fire codes, I'm sure. They heated rocks outside of the Tomo Kahni and brought them in for heating and for cooking. You'll notice there's no real opening up here for smoke. Notice the rocks around the decks. All right. Same Tomo Kahni a little further back, a little different perspective. There were other kinds of shelters that the Kauai'u built. One back here is kind of a little lean-to. We had shade shelters that probably all of us did when we were kids. Little lean-tos to get out of the sun or to hide. In addition, they also had constructed a sun shade, which was 4 poles and a roof in the summer, where the family could be out of direct sunlight. This again still is at the museum, showing some bedrock mortars in granite, and also that's going to pound acorns or other types of seeds. Okay. Now this is Andy Green's great-grandfather, great-grandfather. Back in the very early days before contact with Europeans. If you came upon, through some magic, if you came upon this setting at Tomo Kahni and met his great-grandfather's great-grandfather, and you were, through some magic, you were able to communicate, and you asked, or said, I didn't know you folks were here. How long have you been here? And he would respond, slide. We have been here as long as the rocks, as long as the sky and the clouds and the sun. And we have been here as long as the mountains, as long as the plants and the grasses, as long as the animal people, and we have been here forever. And this is the encampment area. The road leading in that we now use for a trail. You can see some scars, and I really don't know, but I suspect they are scars of where structures were at one time. As I understand it, Andy Green, our remaining Anquai Elders' grandmother, Tomo Kahni, was right in this area. This is Nettle Springs, which we will talk about a little further, kind of a city center. It's a town center of Tomo Kahni. Okay. Another view of kind of the southern part of the encampment area. This is where they gathered in the winter. During the winter, they told their stories, the stories that hold the culture and the society together. Now they told the stories only in the winter, the folklore, the myths, and the stories. And they told them only in the winter. Go ahead. Let me back up a little bit. The stories that they told are referenced by in all the literature as the coyote cycle. There are about 65, 67 myths or stories with Coyote as sort of the centerpiece. He is the trickster hero. Now, some of the literature feels he was kind of a bumbling fool. And I personally disagree with it. So I think the sound go out?
Talk into the microphone.
Okay. That's my audio-visual person. I think he fits the trickster hero perfectly. The symbol and the metaphor, I think, comes through in most of the stories. Okay. Now, they tell the stories only in the winter, the myths, the folklore, those stories that hold the society together, because the raven always hears the stories. And the raven immediately goes and tells Rattlesnake. So the stories are only told in the winter because in the winter the rattlesnakes sleep and therefore do not come to the encampment because they can't hear the stories. Otherwise they would come to the encampment. Now this means that the raven obviously is bilingual. He can listen to the lasso and he can talk to the rattlesnake. However, as you read the myths and the stories, you find that all animal people talk to each other. They are all bilingual, so to speak. Okay. This is Nettle Springs itself. This is the town center, you might say. Road that was cut through by property owners in the past. And we'll reference that again shortly. Right along this ledge, there are bedrock mortars that we will look at shortly. Before the Tehachapi quake in '52, this was a year-round springs. it would be necessary to have year-round water. And when it stopped, if there had been an encampment there, we would have had a movement of people. But it is now only seasonal. These are stinging nettles, right in this spot. We think this is a golden willow. From what we understand, it was not there in previous years as a recent growth, but there were willows up and down this green. In behind is an area that we'll show. Okay. Baskets. These are not Kwaisu baskets. These are Paiute baskets from the Owens Valley. The Kwaisu and all of the Native Americans of the Great Basin, the Numic language group, were excellent basket makers. They're just outstanding. You don't see very many in the museums. I know that there is one in the museum in Kern Valley. Here and there you will see one in the museums. Go ahead. These are examples of baskets. The burden basket, water container, a winnowing basket, a seed beater, any number, a great variety of baskets. Okay? In behind the willows that we were pointing out, there are scratches in this sandstone ledge. And this is where the women sat and worked on their baskets and sharpened their awls on the sandstone. You can see the scratches. A delightful place to sit in the shade of the willows on a warm late fall day or an early spring day and work on the baskets and tell stories and gossip. All right. These are the mortars we mentioned. These mortars are in sandstone. They're on a ledge right along that road that we saw. At one time there were probably 400 in this area, but the road cut through and destroyed many of them. Well, here's our friend again. I only have to do sidebar time. Remember which story we're going into. Let me look at the next slide. I'm sorry. The earth diver. Let's go back to Coyote. At one time, the earth was covered with water. And the animal people came to a coyote and said, we need land. We need food, so we need land. And everybody tried to bring up earth. They were all successful. And they said to Coyote, if you don't bring up some land, we will kill you. And he said, if you kill me, who will do your thinking? That sounds to me like a trickster hero. So he turned to Earth Diver. And Earth Diver went down. All the other animals had fields, but Earth Diver went down and began bringing up Earth, and therefore there is Earth. Now, a little sidebar. This is an American coot. An American coot, we don't talk about this when we give this presentation. Like I say, a sidebar. American coots are terrible divers. When they see them go beneath the water and come up, they come up very rapidly. They're eagle food. Bald eagles have a great time hunting American coot. But the next slide, the breed, this happens to be a pie-bill breed in winter plumage. In the Paiute nest is breed that brought up Earth. So my guess is that Zygmunt was not a real good birder. Summary. Anyway, these kinds of myths appear in almost every culture. Okay. Here's the road looking north. Nettle Springs, Sugarloaf Mountain, encampment area. Now the earth that Earth Diver brought up presents a very varied setting. This darkish red And if we go out there today, we'll find out about the Turkish red mud. Is decomposed basalt, or in other words, volcanic substance. We mentioned the sandstone in this area, sedimentary rock, and the monolith where we saw the cement plant, the metamorphic rock. It all comes together like so many things in the Tehachapi's, where you have evidence of oceanic volcanoes, evidence of continental volcanoes, evidence of one time a great inland lake or sea, and possibly access to the ocean, plus the various volcanic activity. And of course, earthquakes and faults and uplifting where all these mountains came from. The Cache Creek, the same canyon, the gravels are perhaps several thousand feet deep, evidence of great river action. Many fossils have been found in the Sand Canyon area, prehistoric horses, camels. Jawbone Canyon, just over the ridge, is named for shark teeth and shark jawbones. Anyway, a very, very geological setting that Earth Diver brought up, okay? Evidence of mud flows and ash, volcanic ash from continental type volcanic action. This happens to be a blue oak right in the center of this formation, okay? More sandstone. There is a fault line right in this drainage that you can't quite see here. Sandstone on one side and volcanic basalt on the other side. These rocks are called Beal rocks. It was during the time of removal by the Army. Many quiets who hid among these rocks. Okay. The Quiet Sewer, as all of the California Native Americans, hunter-gatherers. Now they had a reputation to be very, very good deer hunters, but really they were more gatherers than hunters. By the way, little sidebar. This area right here, bedrock mortars in granite, okay? They had a good reputation as deer hunters, and also, go ahead, pronghorn. Probably participated in pronghorn hunts in the Antelope Valley with the Katanamons. Sidebar here, just an interesting story. These antelope, the picture was taken in Montana at the National Buffalo Range. And these are all does. The buck is off here, off picture. And he's quite a ways away. I took a picture of him, but he was so far away it doesn't matter. What this particular buck discovered was that the range is fenced. And he discovered that there was kind of a triangle here. It was fenced that you cannot see. So instead of having to protect the herd by going all the way around to fend off other male pronghorn, he discovered all he had to do was cover this little area here. And the herd was all his own and very easy to protect. Okay. This is a blue oak. This is also the shadow here of the photographer. I leave this slide in because I heard Andy Green once say that he was standing beside his brother and they noticed that their shadows looked exactly alike. Blue oak, what we call blue oak canyon. The Quiet Sioux were gatherers. They're in a diverse land with many nuts, seeds, roots available. Next slide. From what I have read in the literature, the black oak was by far their preference. just about any place you hike in these mountains and you find black oak groves, you'll find bedrock mortars. Okay. These are bedrock mortars in granite. These are on the ridge where Gene and I live. There are quite a few of them. Go ahead. The purpose of the mortars is to pound the acorn after it has been heated and shelled, and you put the kernels in the mortar and pound them, and you end up with acorn meal, or acorn meat, you want to say. This is my left foot and Gene's right arm. Holding the 18-inch ruler. That is not a 12-inch ruler, that's an 18-inch ruler. So that you can see the double digits start right about here. So it's about a foot deep. The next slide. Again, the same 18-inch ruler, and you can see it's about a foot in diameter, close to that. Beautiful spot on a ridge, underneath black oak trees, and above a creek, the North Fork of the Sycamore. Beautiful spot. And here's the slick. Once the kernels are turned to a meal or acorn meat, put on a slick and brown. This particular slick is in Tomo Kahni, and it is basalt. It is volcanic, very hard volcanic rock. The plants. The plant community of this area, both the northern and southern California mountains come together, merge here. The Mojave influence, the Great Central Valley, all these plant communities merge in this area. There's great, great diversity. The juniper, the entire plant was used. It's California juniper. The entire plant was used. The wood trunks and stalks for structures. Also some of the smaller limbs and twigs for making bow and arrow. It does produce a berry. It was used. It is a conifer, has a small cone, and there are seeds used. The segmented needles used as an inhalant, put on the fire and used as an inhalant. The entire, and I suspect a lot of the wood was also used for firewood. The entire plant, very, very useful. Here's one with the berries. And the next one shows the little cones. Okay. Bunch grass. I understand that in about a day's time, enough seeds can be gathered to bake a couple of small loaves. And I mean small loaves, hand-sized small loaves. All of these plants were very, are very, very nutritious. It doesn't take a lot of bread or a lot of some of these seeds to go a long ways. They're high in protein, high in calories. Okay. The Great Basin sage, juniper's in the background, the Great Basin sage, also used the seeds, again, for food. The bark from the Great Basin sage, used, matted, used for clothing, feet for shoes. Sidebar, I understand also they might have been matted and used for diapers too. Okay. Ephedra, wild tea. Those are the Great Basin sage and the ephedra, and the adaptation to a desert, a very hot climate. The ephedra has very, very tiny leaves. The chlorophyll is in the stems of these stalks. Very definitely adapted to a warmer, hot climate. Blue oak in the background. The ephedra is used as a tea, as a decongestant. Okay. chia. Chia is actually sold out commercially. Again, very, very high in protein, energy, high levels of energy you get from these seeds. Okay. Typical plant community. We have Phaedra, juniper in the background, some cotton thorn bushes, almost everything. Some California buckeye. All these plants with seeds used by the Kauai. Okay. This Blue Oak Canyon, we showed just a portion of it previously. Pinyon pine, blue oaks, lots of juniper in this canyon. Probably a residual forest. You wonder that if at one time perhaps the entire area looked like this, or at least along the drainages looked like this. The pinyon pine, as you enter the park on the north side of Tranquility Road, there is the pinyon forest. To the east, there is pinyon forest, and to the south, pinyon forest. Okay. The Kauai say that at one time the pinyon forests were not there, but that the pinyon bird brought the seeds. And the pinyon bird probably was the pinyon jay. And this is a pinyon jay. And it does have a reputation of catching pinyon seeds, pinyon nuts, pardon me, and propagating pinions over a wide area. We have documented pinyon jays in the Sand Canyon area. Okay. Joshua trees, as you go east and down into the desert, Joshua trees. The Joshua tree also is used. The fruit and the roots. Okay. Wild tobacco. We mentioned stinging nettles previously. The Kauai Sioux felt they were given 4 medicines. One was the tobacco, used the women chewed and smoked. We mentioned the stinging nettles, used medicinally, but could also be used as food. The other 2 were Jensen weed and red ants. The 3 tobacco, red ants, and Jensen weed are all psychic active substances. So they were used to induce dreams. Is that where we mark for break?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's break there just for a little bit. I know that Craig is here. Do you have announcements or anything that you want to, or should we go right ahead into break?
Go right ahead into break.
Okay.
That's awesome. I don't recommend going out to that. It's too muddy out there.
About 18 years from now.
Yeah.
Okay. In the when we're presenting these slides at a campfire or some such, in some cases we say more than we're saying today, and in some cases less. Anyway, this, let me get my pointer here again. This is taken from Sand Canyon Road here. As you know, John Hare, one of our volunteers, has a nursery. He's not operating it right now. He's doing some other work at the present time. But this little dot right there is his water tank. And he's been measuring the rain there for about nine years. Okay, at this point in our talk, we bring up the weather. Tomo Kahni is just on the other side of this ridge. In fact, we were standing up here. Teddy Bear Cave would be directly below you, about 150 feet in elevation. But our volunteer, John Hare, has measured rain here for about 9 years. Now, in Bear Valley, our average rain is 22, or precipitation is 22.5 inches a year. And that's about 25 miles as the raven flies from this spot. Tehachapi averages about 12.5. This is in the rain shadow of the mountains, Bear Mountain, Cummings Mountain, Tehachapi Peak. And here again, the mountains form another rain shadow, and so Tomo Kahni receives about 8 inches a year. As the airflow continues on across Sand Canyon and begins to raise on the mountains to the east of Tomo Kahni, the average rainfall or precipitation increases to about 12.5, about the same as Tehachapi. Now, weather has a lot to do with where the Kauai Sioux were. If their ancestors were in the southern Sierras, in the mountains 3,000 years ago, there was a very, very wet period. And they left. It was kind of a mini ice age. Long 1,000 to 1,300 years ago, there was a tremendous drying of this wet period throughout the lower elevations. So the Kauai Sioux came back into the mountains. Among the various shamans, there was weather shamans who predicted the weather. They used the moss on trees as a real good indicator. Moss does respond to humidity. So it's a pretty good indicator. One of their helpers was this little feller. We know it as the species as the plain titmouse, but the little tuft, little crest here reminds you of moss. So he became the witherbird in the stories. Okay? And you wonder what that titmouse thought of that cloud. That's that recent cloud. There was a picture of it to Tehachapi News. It's a particular cloud. Fascinating. I have another picture of it with the sun setting on it. But you can see telephone poles in the foreground, so I figured probably couldn't pass as being Tomo Kahni. Okay? Pretty poor picture. Got to get out there in the afternoon to take this picture. As we go along the trail through Tomo Kahni, right here is what we call Shelter Cave. It's a very small cave. Not sure what the use it was used by the Kauai Sioux. Could have been used for a lookout during the removal times. Could have been for storage, any number of purposes. It probably was not used for ceremonial purposes. The tree right next to it is a silk castle tree, which again is a muscle relaxer and was used by the Kauai Sioux. Over 200 plants were used for either structures, clothes, or food by the Kauai Sioux. Again, tremendous diversity in the Tehachapis. At break, we were talking about the oak tree. This year, I don't know how many of you noticed that some of the oaks didn't produce acorn at all. Our valley oak in our front yard did not. The black oak were very, very sparse in our area. But the live oaks, the canyon live oak and the interior live oak were just loaded with acorns this year. Without that diversity, if you're a gatherer community, society, you've got problems. You can't depend on one crop. If one fails, hopefully there are others in the area that produce well. Okay. Very important. Go to the next one. This is kind of the east end of the bowl. The other one is kind of the west end of what we call Hidden Valley. Okay. This is the central part of Hidden Valley. Right in here is a cave we call Teddy Bear Cave. Has petroglyphs, actually pictographs. And this is a very important area to the Pliocene. The Native Americans did not look upon land as a commodity. All land was sacred to the Pliocene. But there are places that are more sacred than others. An event has taken place that become very, very important to the tribal. Okay. As we move across the valley, we come to Hidden Bear Cave, which is right here. Okay. Another view of it in this area. Okay. Sidebar. I don't talk very much about in our presentations, nor even on the walks. We do not talk a whole lot about the cave. When on the walks is the soup and the strip, we let Andy do most of the talking when we're at the cave. But in the talks, we don't talk a whole lot about the cave, simply point out that they're there and they are important to the Native Americans. Animals. In the Tehachapies, the Paiutes, the Scoties, there are probably 60 variety of mammals. This is a wood rat nest to be in Hidden Valley. Okay. There are bear, in fact, bear, mountain lion, deer, coyote, bobcats have been seen in Tomo Kahni. The myths and stories of the Pliocene that mention bear are probably references to grizzly bear and not the black bear, which this is. The grizzly bear having become extinct some years ago in the area. But there is a lot of bear activity in Sand Canyon, in fact all through the Tehachapies and the Paiutes. Okay? Bobcats. Been seen in Tomo Kahni, very animal throughout these mountains. Okay. The black-tailed hare, kind of a funny picture of a black-tailed hare, but it's a black-tailed hare. You find black-tailed hare, you'll find bobcats and coyotes. Again, a Paiute basket. Now, a coyote came along and saw this basket, and the bubbling pool where the oars is, tipped over the basket, okay? And the first people emerged. Actually, in California quail. Another coyote story, okay? Now, do you know why rattlesnakes only have 4 teeth? One day, a hummingbird, who was very, very quick, would fly in and grab a tooth. And he kept doing this, and rattlesnake kept trying to get him, of course, but was unable. He's not as quick as the hummingbird. Well, along comes our friend coyote, and he thinks he can do that. But he's not that quick. So he interrupts the whole process right at the point where the rattlesnake still has 4 teeth. That's the reason he has 4 teeth. Okay. I wonder what we're supposed to go over.
I think we have to change.
We have to change carousel. giving a presentation and we're talking about Tomo Kahni, we do not show one show today just as kind of general information. This is the mountain sheep. I'm sure everybody recognizes. The particular picture we took in Montana. Okay. We got to Little Petroglyph. This is all kind of sidebar. Got to Little Petroglyph Canyon, Renegade Canyon. And some 10 to 20,000 petroglyphs in that canyon, most of which are mountain sheep. At the time of the Kozo tribute in that area, there were many mountain sheep. I think it's very doubtful that at any time there were many mountain sheep in this area. And note the weapon being used here. It's an atlatl that was the weapon of that day. We're talking, they're not sure, anywhere from 2, 3, going back to 10,000 years ago. Okay? And the area was quite different than it is now. The Sierra Nevada and the Mojave Desert, the area of the Kozo Native Americans, large lakes, the whole drainage coming down from the Owens Valley, from the Sierras, both the White Mountains on the east and the Sierra Nevadas. Eventually, of course, these dried up. Okay. Here's the atlatl that was used. What it did is it gave the arrow, if you want to use that term for this, a boost. Hold it back, throw it forward. There's the weight. And this, you notice the ring, the finger, not rings here. And it gives a lot more velocity to the arrow, not horribly accurate. Okay. And here's our petroglyph at Tomo Kahni. I'm still not sure what kind of a weapon. Jerry says spear. They probably, in the scripted notice that I have, I say bow and arrow in the script. It cannot be a bow and arrow, because this is probably 2,000 years old, this petroglyph. And the atlatl was being moved. So it's some sort of an atlatl or spear type weapon. Okay, back into, no, back to, no, okay, go to the petroglyph. Okay, in our regular talks, why we say this is the one petroglyph in Tomo Kahni. Cave petroglyphs are pictographs, are painted. The Guayasu, as far as we know, did not do the cutting type of petroglyphs. It was probably dates 2,000 years or older. And it may have been done when there were mountain sheep in the area. If you interpret this as a mountain sheep, there is a scratch here that was not the original. Someone was done there. I always looked at it as possibly a palm one. Anyway, the one petroglyph, this is almost right in the center of Tomo Kahni. There's an interesting spot with a bunch grass. There's an overlay of asphalt right on top of an area which is sandstone. Okay. Now the dating of petroglyphs is sidebar stuff. The dating of petroglyphs is very, very difficult. But what do you think about this one? The early 70s, something like that, 60s. But you've got to be kind of careful though. Go to the next one. But you figure out at China Lake that maybe 42, 43, first exploring, maybe guys went up in their Jeep, but look at the wheel. I'll bet you it was early 70s again. So you've got to be careful in dating these country things. This, of course, is just terrible, that kind of vandalism out there, although fortunately there isn't a whole lot of it. This is a house ring, dates back to the Tomo Kahni, what it looked like with the rocks around the base of the Tomo Kahni. Okay, this is not at Tomo Kahni, this is still in the Tehachapi, but not in the Tomo Kahni State Park. House ring, pretty good size, probably an average size Kahni. Okay. Here's a larger one. This would house a pretty good family and take, a pretty good structure. Okay. And here are two smaller Tomo Kahnis. He had other uses, perhaps storage or some other use. Okay. This is another cave. It does have pictographs. Again, in the Tehachapi, but not in Tomo Kahni. Okay. Another view of it. There are many areas throughout the Paiutes and Scoties and Tehachapis that were important areas. We have pictographs and have house rings not terribly far away. Hopefully someday we can include all of these within the state park structure. Another view of the cave. This particular spot there actually are two caves. Okay. This is a mound. No secret meaning to these. It's along a trail, and what we hear is that as you go along the trail, you deposit a rock for good luck as you follow the trail. The trails, the Paiutes did go out into, as we mentioned before, out into the desert areas. There's also evidence that there was a trail clear from the coast that the Chumash had contact with the Paiutes on out to Red Rock Canyon, where the state park is now, and on out into the coast. This trail probably met that trail somewhere in the Jawbone Red Rock area. Okay. You can see this is taken from just in back of the previous mound. As you go up the trail, another mound. So follow those mounds. Back in there are springs all through these mountains. This one happens to be dammed up right now, but it is a year-round spring, and it's not far from those house rings that we just looked at. Okay. Well, here's Andy Green's great-grandfather's great-grandfather working on a tool, and it's probably early spring. So we head out to Joshua trees to harvest the roots and the fruit. Let me interject here that I don't use the word nomad with the Hawaiians. I don't feel that they were nomads. They knew perfectly well where the nuts, the seeds, the roots, the fruit were, and they knew perfectly well when to go and harvest and to gather, moving their winter home for the balance of the season to go to various harvesting and gathering areas. Okay. Into summer, and it's time to harvest the pinyon nuts. This has to be done with real good timing. If you do it too early, the pinyon cone is very, very difficult to extract the nuts. If you wait too late, why the small rodents and the birds are going to get those pinyon nuts and it starts to open. So the timing is important. They knew perfectly well when to do that. Okay? And then when the red buds, or the rosebuds, the rosebuds turn red, or the acorns are ready for harvesting.
scene of Tomo Kahni area. And what has happened is getting dark because, actually, our friend Coyote has just thrown the sun into the ocean. And he's made everybody pretty mad. But he, did things like that. Okay? So the animal people, it's dark and it's cold, and this goes on for several days. And they're pretty mad, especially Bobcat. And he's very mad. And he tells Coyote, you better bring the sun back or we'll kill you. And again, he says, you'll kill me, who will do your thing? Okay? So he instructs the owl to hoot, and the ducks to quack, and the sun reappears. Sunrise. Sunrise in Bear Valley, in Bannon, in Tehachapi, and then over Tomo Kahni. Sunrise again. Okay. And there's dawn. Tomo Kahni is dawn, and the sun is present. And it's quiet in Tomo Kahni. No more stories, no coyote stories. And it's quiet. Okay. That'll do it for this presentation. And you'll notice that as you go through you say quite a bit at the parking lot. I reference Tony Hillerman there on Thief of Time. And it's kind of a nice way of talking to the folks, the people that are on the tour, about the theft of artifacts. Tony Hillerman's Thief of Time, the storyline there is pot poaching. And so it's kind of a nice way to talk about the artifacts that we're going to, if we do happen to see artifacts, we're going to leave them there, along with the plants and the rocks and so forth. And I move away from the parking lot, and my first subject is weather, because I think weather is an important part of the story. And as we move up the road, we then talk about geography, because as you're standing there, in every direction that you look is Kohayasu core country. And then we go up a little ways and talk about geology. And that's where I usually tell an earth diver story. We go a little further. By that time you're at the juniper, the famous juniper bushes right along the road. We talk about plants. Although we will talk about plants a number of times along the trail. Then just before we get to Nettle Springs, we usually talk about animals, because by that time we've probably seen some birds, hopefully a black-tailed hare, maybe some other animal. And then we get to Nettle Springs, and we talk quite a bit there, because there are a lot of, the mortar, there's the stingly nettles themselves. We want to talk about those. Gene takes half the group behind and talks about the scratches and about basket making. And then I usually tell some stories for the other half, and then we exchange when the other half comes out. Then we move up the road to the trail. There's a bend in that trail, the famous Bill Bird Trail. You follow the drainage, and you make almost a 180 back to the right. And right there is this gorgeous example of the plant community of Tomo Kahni. And you can talk about all sorts of plants. Also, and it sounds like the mud is too deep and we're not going out today. But when we have a chance to take you on a tour up there, we'll tell you the story. And usually I will retell the story when I'm taking a tour. That bend in the trail seems to be the magic point in which very young infants that are along, some of them aren't even a little older than infants, need a diaper change. And this is the absolute truth, right, Jerry? This happens out there. This happened 3 times that I know of. That right at that bend in the trail, we stop and we're talking about plants, and we're talking about some other things. We look at them, and here is a area. Jeannie Hamrick's battery dead already?
Circle K. It should have known.
Circle K. Circle K. Try it again. There we go. Probably me. Maybe my battery's dead. Anyway, I was standing there talking when the Gene always is at the end of the line, and right there, single file. And in leading it, you kind of go up and you're above the group, so it's kind of like an amphitheater, so you can talk clear to the end and the group beside you are in a sort of kind of V configuration. And I'm talking, and I look over the heads, and here is a baby having a diaper change. And this has happened at that spot 3 times, so I'm not exactly sure. I kind of feed it into the talk, even if a diaper is not being changed. Because classroom babies needed attention, just like anybody else. And I usually bring up the fact that probably the bark on Great Basin sage was used for not exactly a diaper, but clean things up. Then we go on up to the trail, you hit the road, and there you see Shelter Cave, and you talk about that. If it's going to the cave, you go on up to the old parking lot, for lack of a better term, where you're overlooking Hidden Valley. And I say pretty much what I did previously, simply point out that this was an important area to the Clyde students, and call it Hidden Valley. And then I let, when we're going through the cave, and Andy is always along, and I let him lead to the cave. And then when we get to the cave, Gene and I don't say very much, just we keep our eyes on everybody, keep everybody kind of herded in, and let Andy do his thing at the cave. We don't stay very long at the cave. On the trail, going and coming from the cave, there's some very strange oak trees, oak shrubs almost, rather than trees, that we suspect are Albert oaks, which are a hybrid between scrub oaks and willows. So I usually point those out, but we don't, or if we have to see some birds, we don't say very much when we're in Hidden Valley. When we come out of Hidden Valley, we branch off of that road and cut across the saddle to the petroglyph. In that saddle, there's some interesting things. There's evidence of volcanic mud flow, ash, volcanic ash. There's some interesting blue earth in that area. And I usually tell the story of my encounter with coyote out there, or our encounter. Gene was there also. Early on, I think it was the second time we had ever been out there. We were inventorying the bird population and making some notes on other plants and so forth. And we were coming up Blue Canyon. From where we are, we had branched off and we're coming up the other side of the ridge where the petroglyph is, coming up what we call Blue Oak Canyon. And Gene was quite a ways back of me, taking some notes, and I was on the track of some birds. We had seen a roadrunner, heard a roadrunner going coo, coo, coo. It was the day of the eclipse. And right at the height of the eclipse, the greater roadrunner was, I think, thinking that perhaps it was sunset, or maybe coyote had thrown the sun in the water. So I was quite a ways ahead, and son of a gun, what we thought were coyotes started barking and yowling and yapping and howling. Did not spot it. Hear it on the left, and then I'd hear it on the right. So I was not sure whether I had one that was continued on and hear him off and on. I got up to that saddle and I spotted him, and it was just one single coyote. I suspect there might have been a den down in that canyon, and he was leading, or she was leading me away from the den. Anyway, it rained. I had my glasses on and ran back of a juniper, and of course I moved my glasses expecting a coyote to come out the other side. And so often in the coyote cycle stories, the myths, you'll hear you read the phrase, "Don't look back or you'll die." So I wasn't expecting the coyote to look back, but he didn't reappear. I moved the glasses back, took the glasses actually down, and looking, and here he was. He had stopped behind the juniper, and it was peeking back at me, come around to see where I was. He fooled me. Then he went on, he headed up toward hidden valley. Anyways, I usually tell that story in there. And also point out the Old Canyon, because that is a gorgeous canyon with huge juniper blue. Then over to the petroglyph and tell our story there, and then we exit. And on the way down, I answer things, or perhaps say things that I've forgotten to say before, and ease on down the trail. And now we have pretty much a trail laid out as to where we're going to go and where we're not going to go. But that's pretty much the tour as we do it.